more good.
A very special episode of More Good Drinks this week, for me at least, because on a cold, wintry night, what else do I want to do than reach out to Tasmania, where there is still daylight right now? And with that, it's very exciting to have Robbie Gilligan from Derwent Distillery, who I think are one of the most exciting newer Tasmanian distilleries, of course, ahead of Tasmanian Whisky Week. It's great to have you on the show, Robbie. Thank you so much for taking some time. How the heck are you on this winter's day?
Look, well, first of all, it's great to be here as well with you, Tash. Yeah, look, the winter's been a bit chilly, but today it's been not too bad. I've actually been out and about with the alpacas, so they've had me running a bit like a bloody idiot, so that's kept me warm today.
One can always rely on an alpaca for that, is what I've heard.
Yes, 3 of them, mate, seriously.
Now, we couldn't tell the story of Derwent Distillery without first kind of pointing out a couple of really obvious things, which is, the first is that is a distinctly un-Tasmanian accent you're carrying. And yet, before you came to Tasmania, you would not have considered yourself a whiskey maker. Fact or fiction?
True. So I'm the Glaswegian Tasmanian now. So I've taken on that Aussie twang. So no worries, mate. You know, it's a bit of Scottish atmosphere. I literally fly the flag for Tassie wherever I go. Even when I go to Scotland and all the distilleries I go to there, they'll call me Robbie for Tasmania. So I'm like, sweet, I'll own that. I'm proud of that. So happy days.
So tell us a little bit about Derwent Distillery and where it began, and in particular, how your journey into whiskey began. I suspect that fairly quickly in the story, your wife, Emma, who couldn't be with us today, but is a really big part of the story. I suspect that she's been part of the story from the beginning.
Absolutely. In fact, without Emma, I wouldn't be here. That's the truth. So it was Emma and Emma's mum and Emma's dad. I credit all 3 of them with actually getting me into the industry and getting me to move to Tasmania. Because before that, I was not. I genuinely wouldn't have thought of Tassie as being the place that I was going to end up being. And then when I came here and I found that there was a whiskey scene, I was like, oh yeah, Emma, I'm feeling you, definitely. So no, it's really, I'm very blessed and very lucky that Emma and I not only been married, but we've been working together. We've shown that we can work together for about 12 years now. And then, in fact, more than, it's nearly 13 years. So to have that, an understanding that we've got where she works to her strengths and I can work to mine, and we both kind of use that to our advantage, and we know that we're not going to kill each other. That's been pretty good.
Advantageous.
Awesome. Yeah, it's very advantageous, definitely. So no, without Emma, I mean, yeah, Derwent wouldn't be Derwent. So I'm probably the one that people see and hear the most. But Emma is without a doubt, she's just as involved in the business as I am. So yeah, I'm very lucky.
So tell us your journey into whiskey making or into spirits making, and then how you came to open Derwent. And I think once we get to that point in the story, we might crack open a little dram here.
I'm up for that, definitely. All right. No, it's pretty cool because I was on the Gold Coast when I met Em, and she was in Lismore. And it was just one of those chance meetings. I was doing something completely non-whiskey. I was doing a sales product, trying to clean her car, and she was having none of it. And then from there, we just knew that, yeah, I like her. She likes me. Happy days. And eventually, Emma said to me that she wanted to move back to Tasmania. And I was thinking, well, I'm not sure. I don't know. I've never been to Tasmania, but I don't know if I want to leave the sun of, Queensland to go down to Tassie and freeze my butt off. And so I decided that, I said, well, why don't we go for a visit, and I'll meet the folks and see where you're from, and we'll take it from there. So I remember going out, it was about 16 and a half years ago. It was the 25th of January. Well, it was during that time. And I think it was the 3rd day that I was in Tassie, and it was Burns night basically. So Em's mum, Megan, she said that I'll take you out, we'll get a haggis. I'm like, haggis in Tassie? Can you get that? And she's like, yeah. So she took me to a place on the waterfront called the Burst House, and we went in there, and I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. So it was like everything was primo, and sure enough, there's these haggis all lined out, and it was made by a guy called Mark Nicholson, and it had this like kind of Scottish kind of theme to it. And so she was telling me all about Mark Nicholson, that she knew him and she went to school with him, and the kids all called him Mr. Nick, and because he was a teacher and he taught Emma at school. And I thought, bloody hell, mate, I said, that's a small world, isn't it? So I thought that was cool. So then I was able to put a kind of story and a history and a visualization of this guy, Mr. Nick, and I could, thanks Mr. Nick when I'm eating the haggis. And then in the afternoon, Em's dad, Pat, took me out to get some whiskey, and he took me to a place called Lap, which I thought was just going to be a bottle shop, but it turns out obviously it was a distillery. Well, it was part of the distillery. And when we walked up to the place, Bill and Mr. Nick were in their kilts, and unknown to me, I didn't know who they were until Pat pointed out, and he says, the guy on the right, that's Mr. Nick, the guy on the left, that's Bill Lat. And I thought, oh my God, they're real. And it kind of hit me there, that I've never met anyone that's made the food I've eaten or created the drink that I've drank, or, so this was really cool for me. And as we approached them, they both looked up when Mr. Nick saw Pat, and he's like, oh, Patrick, and he says, oh, you brought this young Scotsman to take our Em away. And I thought, how the hell does he know that? I'm literally 3 days into Tasmania, and there's the two of them know who I am. And I thought, oh, this is cool. And I'll never forget it, because that was my first actual dedicated whiskey tasting session I'd ever had. So I drank loads of whiskey before, but in Scotland, there's a myth that all Scottish people know how to drink whiskey, because most of the time you're walking into a pub, you're going up to whoever's behind the bar saying, oh, there's 5 of us, so give me 5 pints, mate. And I gives 5 hoffs, mate, like for mixers. And you'll just drink whatever they give you, basically. So when we were trying Bill's whiskies, I was like, mate, this is pretty special. I thought, this is my favourite. This is how do you get it tasting like this? It tastes like a big fortified kind of wine to me. And he explained about how the types of barrels that he was using were from a specific place. It was in the Barossa, it was Teplixfield in South Australia. And I was just like, oh, this is cool, man, and I'd never really had a whiskey that I could actually taste more than, the usual flavours that you would taste in any other whiskey, basically. And so that was what got me into it. So after that, it was about 2 hours maybe I was in there for. And Bill offered me a job, and I was like, oh my God, that's a game changer. This is cool. I don't have to do sales anymore. I could do this. But thinking, I might have the accent, but I don't know what I'm talking about, Bill. And he says, don't worry about it, son, I can teach you that. He says, you just follow my lead and we'll get you there. And I says, right. Sweet. So I couldn't take him up on the offer then, but 2 years later I was able to take him up on it, and that's why I'm here.
I mean, there's a delightful art and artfulness to it. And I'm thinking that now that you've been in Tasmania for as long as you have, you realise that actually Tasmania is a very small village, and it's no surprise that they already knew who you were and they were worried about you taking Emma away. But, for a Glaswegian making his way to Tasmania to then kind of fall in love with whiskey, the national drink of Scotland, there's a little bit of playfulness to it, Somebody was
Absolutely.
Writing a good story when they decided that.
Yeah, look, everyone asks me what brought you to Tasmania, and I always tell them the truth. I say whiskey and my wife in that order.
Yeah. Very nice. Now, shall we crack a dram? Because
Absolutely.
I happen to, all the way
Cool
on
beans.
the side of the Tasman, I do have 2 delicious bottles of Derwent, the cask strength tawny port that I picked up in my most recent travels.
Nice.
But the botrytis cask.
Mm-hmm.
Let's dive
this is
in.
a very special one to me, this one.
Tell me about it from your perspective.
Well,
I'll tell you from mine. The reason why I couldn't resist bringing this bottle home when I first tasted it is because it stood out to me as being altogether singular it's a small number of botrytis casks that I've tasted, but this stood out to me in particular for its elegance and its structure and its backbone that then allowed the flavours to actually sing on top of that. They weren't competing with anything. There was enough structure there to support it. But talk me through this whiskey from your perspective, because, it's an absolute banger.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. Really do, because it's been a lot of work, a lot of effort to get it to where it is. So I think for me, it was basically like when I was introduced to the Tassie whiskey scene, a lot of it was, there was only 5 whiskey distilleries when I started, and it was so you had Lark and Overeem and Sully's and Nant and Hellier's, and aside from Hellier's, everyone else was it was like a big concentration of fortified wines, like ports and cherries, or Perez and tawnies. And I loved that, I really did. And then as I got to understand more about it and started, contributing more and creating the spirits, we went into like muskets, tokais, that kind of thing, and I loved that. But there wasn't a lot, in fact, there was barely any of botrytis casks being used for whiskey. And I was like, why is that? Why is nobody doing it? And so I decided that I would start my own whiskies, and I would experiment, or I would try and experiment with, things from barrel types to barrel sizes to grain types and mash bills and whatnot, and distilling techniques and all sorts, and really get to guinea pig a few things and just learn more, basically. You know what I mean? And the botrytis first came to me when Darren, my mate who owned Tas Cask Company, so at the time it was the only cooperage in Tassie, and it was in Hobart, it was just outside of Hobart, so it was pretty accessible, and we all used them. And I asked Darren about it, because he had about 25 years at the time in the wine industry and barrels, and I says to him, Daz, what's the deal with botrytis, mate? Because I'm not a big wine person myself, but I love botrytis wine. For me, it's a go-to. soon as if I'm in a restaurant and there's you've stuffed your face and you've got no room left for food, but there's always room for a bottle of botrytis, maybe two. And so I says to him, what's the deal with that? And he says, well, it's pretty rare. He says, because it's not a readily available barrel type. And I said, all right, okay. He says, but I have got my hands on some. I said, there was almost 20 barrels. And I says, right, how much are they? And he told me, and I was like, oh, bloody hell. So they were really expensive. And I says, why are they so expensive? Like, what's the deal with? And so I bought 10 of them, and I was at Redlands at the time. And so I was leasing the equipment, the distillery, the brewery, all that out to myself. And so I thought, well, let's start with these. Let's get some spirit in these. And I thought, right, well, theoretically it's a sweet dessert wine. So, and I loved that. So I thought, right, so I'll create a spirit that I think will kind of, work with that and hopefully pull out all the beautiful things that I like about botrytis. Hopefully that will come through in the final spirit. And I remember there was 10 individually matured barrels, and after what was just over 2 years, I got Mr. Nick. Actually, I got him in as my chief taste tester, and I says, I want to do a tasting panel, Mr. Nick, with these botrytis casks. Can you come and do it with me? And he says, absolutely. And I remember going into the bond store and we lined them all up and we took samples from each of them. And as we were tasting them, Mr. Nick just looked at me and he took his sip and he smelled and he's like, what's that? And I went, shit, it's whiskey, I hope. And he says, all right. And he says, what kind of cask is it? I says, well, I'm not going to tell you. I says, I'd rather you tell me what you're getting. And he's like, oh, fair enough. That's fine. Cool. So, and with Mr. Nick, he's going to hit it away. I mean, I could talk, that man could talk, right? And he can talk beautifully. So if you ever need to taste the notes, he's the man for it. And so he's writing down it. He's writing a bloody essay. And I'm like, what's he writing? So he put it down as, from what I can remember, he wrote porcini mushrooms, pantry spices. I remember there being lots of earth and sweetness in there as well. And I thought, oh my God, that's not what I thought it was going to be. Like I thought that it would be like, I don't know, melons and honey and beautiful, lovely, fruity notes. And so Mr. Nick, we loved it, we loved it. So I decided that I would have to get more involved in the barrel maturation side of it. You can't just, make a good spirit and get a good barrel and put the two together and nature will take care of the rest. Turns out with botrytis, it's a lot harder than that. There's a lot more to it than that. And I started kind of, all right, so I got my hyperfixation on it and I thought, right, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get, I'm going to learn more about it. What is botrytis and, why is it affecting the barrels like this? Why is it tasting like this? And to the point where I even got the barrels checked to see that they were all right and that I wasn't, and it turns out, no, you're all fine, Robbie. Everything's all good. And just learning more about the botrytis side of things really opened up my eyes and made me look at the chemistry of it, because botrytis wine being, grapes affected by the botrytis rot and hot, wet climates. When you put that into a barrel, turns out all the barrels are always French oak. So they're always virgin oak French oak barrels and they're all 225 litres in size, so barriques in Australia. But it's a rot. It's a name it's a wine that's named after a rot, not the grape. So that's how much influence obviously it's got in the wine. So what I found was by putting a spirit into it, you're talking like almost 10 times the alcohol content and the physical effects that will have on a barrel that up till now has been untouched compared to what the wine would have had physical effect on the barrel is like worlds apart. That wine doesn't take anything from that barrel. That's a virgin oak French oak. It's the most tannic, most, darkest of all the flavours, like Black Forest Gatos, all that kind of stuff. So when the spirit goes into it, that's then stripping out all the oak, all the tannin, all the volatilic acids, all the, everything that's from all the colour, everything. And it's a bombardment of all sorts that the sweetness is actually like it's like a snifter of it is barely there. Do you know what I mean? So you've got to I had to figure it, right, shit, how do I, excuse my French, how do I retain that sweet character that's in there, but maybe lose some of the funk? And it was just learning about that and realising that, this is cool. This is if you want to jump into the deep end, this is it. And so, I just spent the next couple of years just really kind of tuning in on that and changing things that needed changing but still just using botrytis barrels. And the final result came out as botrytis Pt.1, and it was, everyone loved it. Thank God. That's brilliant. So, and it was more that I wanted, there was that, as I said, it was like a honeyed note. The mouthfeel on it, I love, because mouthfeel for me, by the way, right, is just as big as the flavour. Right? Flavour's a given, right? How you perceive
texture is everything,
flavour,
because it tells you about the alcohol. It tells you about the quality of the spirit that the flavours are hanging on. And so if it's too thin, if it's too oily, if it's too heavy, if it's too, there are, and I often when I'm tasting, I am using shapes to describe the texture of, it's not just how the spirit feels on your palate, but it's actually the shape that the spirit takes in your mouth. And that textural component is almost the most important part now, because if that part's not right, the whole integration and balance of a spirit is going to fall away.
Yep, I agree with that totally. I'm a very visual person. So when I'm doing, I'm tying this in with another thing, but when I do tasting panels, right, I'm not the guy that waxes lyrical and says, oh yeah, this tastes like almonds on a Tuesday afternoon on a specific, I don't get specific with things. I often wonder where people get the tasting notes from. Do you know what I mean? I'm very much like what I can measure, what I can sense, what I can detect, So like mouthfeels for me and how the mouthfeel kind of expands and grows. And, so a good whiskey for me would hit me, not just the front palate, it's going up to the middle, and even better if it can get to the back third. And once you feel it going across the palate, I know I've got a whiskey that I'm bunkering down for the night, and I'm drinking that and nothing else. And I'm just going to savour it, Well, everyone's already finished theirs. I'm still at the nosing stage, I'm just enjoying how, that since I've sat down, it's warmed up 5 to 10 degrees or something, and so my whiskey's just giving me all these beautiful, it's like I'm taking on a journey. So I'm, if I'm spent a lot of money on a whiskey, I'm enjoying every part of it. It's not just how it tastes and how it's going down, it's and how it lingers, how it stays behind in my mouth, and what, like in terms of like, it's like almost like a wave, coming through, and I always remember being fascinated by it when I came to Tassie, how the hell can I be tasting something after I finished it and it comes back and you're getting a secondary, even third, how's that possible? And that fascinated me. And so for me, it's like, yeah, the mouthfeel part of it is what I love as much as anything. In fact, even mushrooms, I can't stand mushrooms, by the way, right? So when Mr. Nick said Pt.1 mushrooms, I was horrified, right? And I thought, shit, oh no, what have I done, man, right? And for me, mushrooms, when I think about it, right, yeah, I don't like the flavour, and I really don't, right? It's the texture, it's the consistency, it gives me the bulk, right? And it's like, it's horrible. So for me, and the whiskey, if it's something that I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm feeling that. Taste will change. Like literally, I'll taste this botrytis today, right now, and I'll tell you it tastes like this, or I'm getting that, and I'm feeling this. I'll try this tomorrow, and I'll have had a completely different day doing whatever, and it'll taste different. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes people say...
That's why breakfast is the best time to drink whiskey.
Yeah. And lunch.
But that being said, what are you getting on this botrytis today?
Well, today... It was me. It's great. I've been smelling whiskies all day, so I might have a bit of palate fatigue and nose fatigue, but it's actually better than alpaca spit. I'll tell you that. I had the spit. They weren't spitting at me, right? I had to give them their injections today, so I had to wrestle with them and hold them. And because they didn't like getting the injection, they spit out all the stuff, and it's manky, but it landed on my face or my nose, and all I can smell was it. So I'm just filthy. Enjoying the fact that I'm not smelling alpaca spit.
It's almost as good as taking a shower.
Yeah. I'll be taking one of them soon, definitely. But see, a good whiskey, right, for me, is as soon as you hear that, as soon as you go, whether you're at a bar or a whiskey bar or a pub or whatever, or just at home, as soon as you get the pop of the cork or the twit, and you start going, oh, smell that, you don't do that when someone pours a pint.
No.
Do you know what I mean? Smell that pint, smell this. No thanks, pal. That's disgusting. It's like with a whiskey, it's like, that's like, and it'll take you somewhere. Do you know what I mean? So right away, you're on you're literally kind of, you're interacting, you're talking about it. It's getting people excited, or it's getting people going, what is that? And then, so you're conversing, and it's not just about you, it's about the person you're with or the person next to you. It might be a stranger, it might be the person opening up the bottle, but it's got you engaged, it's getting you, so now you're getting excited about it, and you're like, oh yeah, this is good, right? And so for me, it's like, I just love just sitting on a whiskey. Like, even if I weren't doing this, right, you might see that I only drink it twice or something, or once or twice. For the most part, and even when I was learning about it, like Mr. Nick and Bill and Tim Duckett and all those guys, even Emma for me, right, I'm talking about me a lot, but Emma, her nose is awesome, right, and her palate is amazing, right, and so I rely on it a lot, to the point where if I'm doing a tasting panel, it's not just about me or Mickey, who's our other distiller. I have to get Emma in on it, whether she's there or not. I'll take everything. In fact, I just brought these home with me for Emma and I to try, right? It's just some of the future releases that we've got, because even though she might not drink as much whiskey as I would, she's representing most of the people that are probably going to be drinking my whiskey anyway. Not everyone has a distillery or is, a diehard member of a whiskey club, or, writing publications or you know what I mean? It's for the most part, it's people of all walks of life and preferences and you know. So Emma's palette, I find, reflects that a lot more, and she can pull out things that I can. And so I rely on that, and I value that a lot. So that's again, so the flavour profile you're tasting isn't always just from me; it's from us as a collective, as a team. And the botrytis one, even though I did put pretty much all the thought into it and the process and the you know, the hard kind of work of it, you know, Emma was there to see it through each of those stages and recognise, I see what you're coming from. I'm getting this, and I'm all right, okay. And if she's pulling out something that I can't detect, it was good because I was saying, oh, good, the sweetness is there, or that kind of note that I would want in a botrytis, you know, what it does, doing what it says on the tin. She was able to detect all of that stuff, so it was a combined effort, big time. So to actually have the final product in a bottle and people are drinking it and favouring it, and this is actually probably my best seller, I would say. Currently, to the
and
point
for good
where
reason.
I've not got enough.
I mean, for me, this just kind of bursts to life with porcini mushroom. Probably wouldn't be the first note, but
it's not anymore. No, I got rid of it. That was from like
it was
when
too
I first
far.
started doing it. That was years ago. No, I literally made that my first mission to get rid of that. I don't want that in my tasting notes whatsoever. So that was the first thing I stamped out. Yeah, but you were saying, sorry.
But there is a savoury, yeasty component to it on the nose, which is that sweet laminated brioche, which I think is really pleasing because it's very warm and inviting. And then there is, you know, a very distinct baked apricot and baked pear that comes through, and the intensity of that fruit, you know, when a piece of fruit has been baked down to it's almost like chewing candy.
Yes.
But not quite. And that's some of the sweetness that is apparent here in this nose, which I absolutely I love and appreciate. Walk us through, because you distilled for a number of other Tasmanian distillers, and then there was some crossover as you were developing your own
That's correct.
Your own
yes.
style, correct?
So after I got the job at Lark, I started initially front of house and just learning basically, you know, and gaining confidence, because a lot of people would ask me and hear my accent go, oh, you know, you're talking about, so how do you do this? And what's the temperature of that? And what's the pH of this? And I'm like, oh my God, shoot, I had this big kind of feeling of imposter syndrome, you know. And one day so I said to Bill, Bill, I need to, you know, I want to know more about this. I really want to get in depth with it. So he did. So he got me more involved in stuff. And then one day we were out in the kind of beer garden bit at the back of the cellar door at Lark. And I thought, how am I going to approach this with Bill, right? Because he just sold to the shareholders, the people who just bought it, but not the current guys who own it. It's the original ones, so they were all locals. And I
mean, Tasmanian Whisky Distillery's changing hands is a whole different story. For another time.
No, this was a cool time because there was more than one person involved, but you know, it was just very much, it still had a family feel to it, and I loved that, you know, and I felt like I was always part of something that, and I enjoyed that, you know, because before that I'd been working in big companies or retail management and sales and all that. This was something that I felt like I like getting up in the morning, I like going to work, I like, you know, it wasn't work, and I was always hanging around after it, and I was always learning. It inspired me to read books and learn stuff, and it was great. And one day I says to Bill, Bill, I want to take your picture. He says, what for? And I says, oh, my mum will love it. And he goes, shut up. And I says, no. So I got it all set up. I says, do the Bill Lap pose and do all this kind of stuff. So he's doing all this, right? And I took the picture eventually, and he didn't realise that right behind him on the wall at the back, on the brick wall at the Lap cellar door, was the big banner we used to put every day with a picture of Bill in the Bond store doing just that. So I'd just taken a picture of Bill doing the exact same pose as what he had behind him. So when I showed him the picture, he's like, yeah, bloody idiot, right? So I knew that I'd got him in the mood. I thought, right, now I'll ask him. And I says, Bill, you know how like you're retired now, basically, you know, you're going to go fly fishing into the sunset and doing your thing. It says, look, what would, and you're the face of Lark, obviously. It says, what do you think about a younger face? You know, somebody that could, you know, represent not just, you know, historical, you know, it's the well-to-do gentleman's drink. It was now like, you know, it says identifying the true people who are actually, the growing number of people that are actually drinking whiskey, which was, at the time, it was females between 20 and 35. It was a lot of people. It wasn't an old man's drink anymore. And he says to me, he did this, you know, and he went, we've been waiting for you to say that. And I thought, shoot, right, okay, bloody hell, I thought it was just chancing mum, I didn't realise that. And he says, but Robbie, mate, he says, you need to, his words, but you need to talk the talk as well as walk the walk. You need to be able to stand in front of a hall full of a room full of scientists about the science of it. You better talk to the agriculture people at the ag side of it, right? And I says, right, okay, yeah, absolutely. And he says, right, let's get on to it. And from that moment on, my life changed because I wasn't just doing one thing. I wasn't at the distillery on this day. It put me everywhere. So I was doing production, I was doing sales, I was doing marketing, I was doing business, I was doing all sorts. And so I really learned, everything really. I was learning all sorts of things about distillery running and practices and it was amazing. I was, this is awesome. So again, every day I was just like, I'm learning something new. I'm applying it as well, which was cool. And I can now help these guys because I know more about this. And eventually I got to the point where I said to Bill, I says, mate, I think I'm ready to do this. I think I'm ready to at least look into more stuff. And he says, I think you are as well, mate. And so he offered to help me out, which was great. And then he says, but there's another option.
He has a habit of doing that.
What's that?
He has a habit of doing that.
He does, doesn't he? He really does. Mate, I love him. I really do. He said, I know him as Bill. You know what I mean? Like he's my pal, and I love that. And I'm very lucky. I know that. And I'm very blessed with it. And I'll never, it's why I'm doing what I'm doing, basically, and I love it. And he said to me, there's another option, mate. And I says, what's that? And he says, well, there's another distillery that, he'd been part of to set it up in the initial stages, and it was called Redlands Distillery. And obviously I knew who they were, and I was, cool. And he says, we'd like you to come and, be part of that and manage that and bring Emma. And I was like, right, okay. So I thought, this is great. This is fantastic. So Emma can get, into the industry and we'll work together. And I thought, this is great, Bill. Absolutely. So we took that role on. And so Dean Jackson, he was the head distiller and he was running things up to that point. And so he was like, oh my God, yes, this is good. This is great. So Dean and I would do all the spirits, and I learned a lot from him as well, because his techniques, he'd learned from Bill initially, and he was already established as like an amazing distiller. And so I learned a lot from him and I enjoyed that, and it was great. And so it was always different. It was a different setting, different scenario, and it was no longer this, 28 people working in the business. It was 3 of us, and it was Redlands. So we all joked that we were Team Red, Robbie, Emma, Dean, and so that was us. And it was like we had no money, we had no budget. The distillery was set up. We had a brewery with the brew section, with the distilling section. We did everything, and at the time it was paddock to bottle. So it was one of only 3 in the world that was single malt paddock to bottle distilleries. And so we learned quickly and a lot, and it was amazing. And we got to the point where we were like, right, I want to put my whiskies down here. And so I did. And it put money into the business, because obviously I was paying for it all. But at the same time, it meant that I could, like, here's my whiskey, which is part of this scene. This scene thrives on this, that, and that. Right? This scene has a provenance that started from this and is now built to that, and we're going there. And by taking that to the rest of the world as a collective, as a group, here's all the differences within that group. So by working together, all the little ones with all the bigger ones, by celebrating the fact that we are actually different and can be different, should be different, right? The consumer can then say, right, well, I see value in that brand, the Tasmanian brand, the Australian brand, right? And within that, I like a whiskey that is like this, so that brand there, I like their stuff. This is what I saw a lot in, and for me it was like, okay, well, eventually that's where I'm going to go. I'm not in it for the short term. I'm not in it to, but at the same time, I'm not going to be a big multinational corporation. It's going to be, I'm going to make I want to upscale what I can do to the best of my ability without taking away from the quality aspects of what I consider as part of my production process. So I will upscale at a natural rate that will reflect what you like about my whiskey. Now, hopefully when I'm upscaling to a point where I'm going into the next stage of my evolution, that you'll still go, yep, that's still Robbie and Emma's whiskey. That's what they're producing now is just as good, if not better, hopefully, than what it was when I bought it 2 years ago at that market. When I like these, they're botrytis casks. And if we all do that, it's bloody exciting. Do you know what I mean? Like, why should it just be Scotland, Ireland, America and Japan? Let's get Australia on there. Let's get out of the New Zealand, by the way, I have to say, because I'm very lucky, I'm very proud actually that the people who bought Lark, one of them was Troy Trewin, who was a big part of the team who bought New Zealand Whisky Co. And Greg Ramsey is one of them as well. And so in fact, my very first ever public speaking thing was on Australian and New Zealand whiskies. And I was very proud of that. I still am. I got a wee goosebumps, by the way. I know you can't see it on the camera, but I'd literally got goosebumps there. I think what we're doing in our part of the world down here, right, in New Zealand and Australia, is so good and so varied. We should be celebrating that, and we should be working together, because we should be having our own category in world whiskey scene, the world spirit scene, not just in whiskey and gins as well. And so I'm a big fan and a big believer of working together, working with your associations, reaching out to people, helping each other, because if one of us messes up, we all suffer. Right, especially when you're trying to establish yourself in any field, all it takes, people want people to fail, right? People want to see people doing shit, right? Because they'll focus on the shit things, right? So by working together, we can help each other improve. We can also help each other be that different part of that scene and get the bloody scene out there. Get people knowing who that scene is. Get people know our region. Get people know what it is that we're all doing here, and let them then decide who they want to. But we should have our own category in the world stage of spirit production. Australia, New Zealand, I think should be their own. I'm a big fan. That's my opinion, and I think that's valid, by the way. Of the same, they'll think of corporate structure. A lot of people are mum and dad start-up businesses, hobbies, you mentioned that as well. Do you know what I mean? Maybe don't have that experience, but we've got their experience that we can draw upon to help us with what we're doing as well. So I think we've really got it. I mean, it's a great opportunity for us to all kind of keep that going, keep that momentum going, and let these people who are coming in also realise that they are part of that, and we kind of need each other, and then that's going to help. Not even in the long run, that's going to establish more reputation, more credibility for them and the company or the companies that they've bought into. You know what I mean? So I'd like to. I'm excited about that. I really want to see more of us.
Okay. We're going to have a whole second conversation. We're going to have a whole second conversation, because we haven't even begun to cover why you're one of only, a handful of Tasmanian distilleries that even talk about or think about sustainability in a broad spectrum way. We haven't even gone to the gin. There's so much more to talk about, but I think we've also covered so much ground in this episode that I kind of want to let this one stand alone and do some work, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But before we bring it into land, or maybe as we bring it into land, can we bring it back I'd love to bring it back just to the spirit itself for a second. Patrick Maguire, legendary in the Tasmanian whisky scene. Part of the reason why I think it's third evolution now is because, it wouldn't surprise me if in years to come, Pat gets likened to Billy Walker of infamy. Somebody who has moved through a number of different distilleries, adding something new each time and continuing to elevate his practice as a producer. And so I think, his new distillery is absolutely going to be one to watch. But within that, part of what excites me about where Tasmanian whisky is at right now is this very distinct, and you spoke about it, the very distinct, multifaceted nature of distilleries that, previously, and I've been to some of those chats, and been to Old Kempton and been to Lorraine and have heard some of the conversations where, it is verbatim, well, Bill told me that he was doing this and this, and so that's what we did. Or even at Overeem, where they still use the same piece of hygiene toweling and terry cloth, because that's what Casey always did. So you just do the thing that Casey always did. And there are so many components of that, what is now old world, traditional Tasmanian whisky. But we also then have these really unique characteristics, the integration of oat into some of what Damien is doing at Hunter Island.
Yeah, man.
I could talk yeast and fermentation with Rob all day long at Warbs. And then there are there are a number of other really spectacular little pockets that I think that stand out because each is so unique. So I'd love to hear your painting a picture of what your spirit character is. What is the character of Derwent Distillery? Maybe it's shape if we go all the way back. Maybe it's shape, maybe it's mouthfeel, maybe it's texture, but you really define Botrytis cask for me. I'd love for you to define the Derwent Distillery spirit character for me as well.
I look at, there's always a signature, right? So there's always something identifying character, quality, mouthfeel, something that always you can blind taste and go, that reminds me of such and such, or that's definitely this, right? For me, it's the mouthfeel, right? For me, it's like my still, I chose my still deliberately, right? My still is electric powered, almost like if you took a Lark or an Overeem or a Hunter Island still, right? Which is more like squatter and chubbier. If you took that and elongated it, so taking it from a Danny DeVito to a El McPherson, right? That's my still. right? And my heating elements aren't external, my heating elements are internal. So at the very bottom of the still is where all my heating elements are. So because I now have this extra height, that I need to allow my vapor to escape and create, and keep going, I'm able to create a spirit that goes from anywhere from, a refined, elegant, fruity, floral, Glenmorangie kind of idea, not flavour, but like that kind of more copper contact, more reflux, more refined spirit kind of character. I can do that, or I can go hard and really create a rich, viscous, oily, big, unapologetic whiskey if I wanted to as well. But I can fluctuate in between. So the way I look at it is currently I've got 2 core releases and I'll have a third release that I'll vary or swap between, right? The idea that I want people to have is not so much flavour, because flavour will always change, right? It's more in the consistency of the thought behind that. There's a, it's not leaving me wanting, right? It gets you thinking about it, gets you talking about it, it gets you engaging, right? That's what I don't, I'm drinking a whiskey just now. There's no one else in the room with me, right? But I'm with you, and I'm with whoever's talking, whoever's watching just now as well. So I am actually drinking with all you guys, right? Otherwise I wouldn't be drinking this. I'd have a cup of tea, to be honest, or I'd have a pint or I'd have a can of Tennent's or something, right? That's what I'd be drinking just now. When I'm with people, when I'm in a sharing environment, when I'm telling stories or hearing stories or, conversing with someone, this is my choice of drink, right? And so for me, it's something that I want to be able to open up the bottle and just enjoy what it's given me. In terms of nose, it makes me think about at least what I'm tasting, whether if I like it, do I like it, do I not like it, what is it I like, what is it I don't like. At least I'm getting you engaging. At least I'm getting you think about it. It's a very interactive, very sociable drink is what I look at as whiskey. And you can't make, the same whiskey won't taste the same to any one person, on different days. Some days, every day people ask me, what's your favourite? What's your best one? What's your best ever? What's the best Derwent Distillery? And I'm like, fuck me. Honestly, mate, it's literally, today's Tuesday and it's in July or whatever. Whereas yesterday it was Monday and it was that whiskey. Today it's all about this one. For me, the Botrytis I'm very proud of, because I've made a flavour profile that no one else was making, which is, I feel, has the benefit of having this beautiful mouthfeel that keeps it going. And fortunately, it's been good enough that people appreciate either the flavour or both the flavour, how it sits with them, and the fact that they can drink it again. And that's, to me, I'm not making whiskey for somebody that can pick out individual things and say, that gives me that gives me that. I'm picking a whiskey that, I don't care if you're male, female, or anything. I don't care if you're of a certain age, if you're younger, if you're older. I want to make whiskies that get people together. I want to get whiskies that make people go, I like that because of, or you like that because of that. Oh, I didn't see it that way, but I get where you're coming from. And it just, I just appreciate that it's the quality for me goes into how I make it. The perception of that quality comes from who's drinking it. And what I've chosen to do is I've chosen to go as sustainable as I can. I use solar power. I use rainwater, which I've come to value a lot, because a lot of distilleries use tap water. Nothing wrong with it. Some distilleries use their own spring water. Great, fantastic. That tells the story of that as well. What I've thought about was the benefits of one, the benefits of the other, the pros and cons of each, and went, okay, well, you look at, say, like distilled water as being a beneficial quality in terms of, let's say, white spirits, right? In terms of how it reduces the amount of oil coming out of solution, so forming flock, more flock and less flock. For me, rainwater ticks all those boxes, and it tells the story of the terroir. So even though I'm not directly pulling out of the Derwent River, I'm literally getting the Derwent River back as it's coming back down again after it's been evaporated out. So it's still able to, and I don't tell it that, but but it's still the terroir component of it. I've not bought distilled water, or I've not reverse osmosed it, the life out of it to make it like, neutral in terms of water. It still tells the story. It still has its flavour component. It still, but it allows me to make whiskey that doesn't have to sit for as long as other whiskies might have to sit for, which buys me that time back and gives me a product that I don't have to have part of the product that I have to separate from the others. I can include all the whiskey in there, so you're still getting all the oils, you're still getting all the flavours, you're still getting all the mouthfeel. You're literally getting everything that I wanted you to get. How you perceive it, that's up to you. But hopefully what you're getting is a whiskey that it gets you engaged and gets you talking. And the packaging side of it, ties into the sustainability side of it. We're not just preaching what people want to hear. It's like, here's my whiskey, which is part of this scene. This scene thrives on this, that, and that. Right? This scene has a provenance that started from this and is now built to that, and we're going there. And by taking that to the rest of the world as a collective, as a group, here's all the differences within that group. So by working together, all the little ones with all the bigger ones, by celebrating the fact that we are actually different and can be different, should be different, right? The consumer can then say, right, well, I see value in that brand, the Tasmanian brand, the Australian brand, right? And within that, I like a whiskey that is like this, so that brand there, I like their stuff. This is what I saw a lot in, and for me it was like, okay, well, eventually that's where I'm going to go. I'm not in it for the short term. I'm not in it to, but at the same time, I'm not going to be a big multinational corporation. It's going to be, I'm going to make I want to upscale what I can do to the best of my ability without taking away from the quality aspects of what I consider as part of my production process. So I will upscale at a natural rate that will reflect what you like about my whiskey. Now, hopefully when I'm upscaling to a point where I'm going into the next stage of my evolution, that you'll still go, yep, that's still Robbie and Emma's whiskey. That's what they're producing now is just as good, if not better, hopefully, than what it was when I bought it 2 years ago at that market. When I like these, they're botrytis casks. And if we all do that, it's bloody exciting. Do you know what I mean? Like, why should it just be Scotland, Ireland, America and Japan? Let's get Australia on there. Let's get out of the New Zealand, by the way, I have to say, because I'm very lucky, I'm very proud actually that the people who bought Lark, one of them was Troy Trewin, who was a big part of the team who bought New Zealand Whisky Co. And Greg Ramsey is one of them as well. And so in fact, my very first ever public speaking thing was on Australian and New Zealand whiskies. And I was very proud of that. I still am. I got a wee goosebumps, by the way. I know you can't see it on the camera, but I'd literally got goosebumps there. I think what we're doing in our part of the world down here, right, in New Zealand and Australia, is so good and so varied. We should be celebrating that, and we should be working together, because we should be having our own category in world whiskey scene, the world spirit scene, not just in whiskey and gins as well. And so I'm a big fan and a big believer of working together, working with your associations, reaching out to people, helping each other, because if one of us messes up, we all suffer. Right, especially when you're trying to establish yourself in any field, all it takes, people want people to fail, right? People want to see people doing shit, right? Because they'll focus on the shit things, right? So by working together, we can help each other improve. We can also help each other be that different part of that scene and get the bloody scene out there. Get people knowing who that scene is. Get people know our region. Get people know what it is that we're all doing here, and let them then decide who they want to. But we should have our own category in the world stage of spirit production. Australia and New Zealand, I think, should be their own. I'm a big fan. That's my opinion, and I think that's valid, by the way. No, it's not. I agree with that. Totally agree with that, because it's true. But I think that we're in a very unique kind of situation, because we've all started from, or restarted in terms of Australia. We've started from small. We all know each other. We all go to venues. We all go to whiskey shows, distillery shows, gin shows. We're all sharing the same floor space. We're all reaching out to the same people. We're all helping each other set up. We're all, we all know each other. We're all part of the scene that we have built, we've established. And so we've already got good grounds to build on that. Granted, you've got, up till recently, say in the last 10 years, right? Up until now, we've all seen that growth together naturally. It's only in the last 5 or 10 years or so that we've started seeing external. No, it's not. I agree with that. Totally agree with that, because it's true. But I think that we're in a very unique kind of situation, because we've all started from, or restarted in terms of Australia. We've started from small. We all know each other. We all go to venues. We all go to whiskey shows, distillery shows, gin shows. We're all sharing the same floor space. We're all reaching out to the same people. We're all helping each other set up. We're all, we all know each other. We're all part of the scene that we have built, we've established. And so we've already got good grounds to build on that. Granted, you've got, up till recently, say in the last 10 years, right? Up until now, we've all seen that growth together naturally. It's only in the last 5 or 10 years or so that we've started seeing external.
Okay, so there it is, part 1 of our incredible conversation with Robbie Gilligan of Derwent Distillery. Please come back for part 2, where we talk a little bit further where we left off about the Tasmanian industry as a whole, some of its history, how it's forming, and what that means for us as whisky lovers, consumers, and even a little insight into further industry opportunity. So be sure to stay tuned, come right back for part 2. It's been great to see you on this episode of More Good Drinks.